Ava, a young nanny, faces racism from a matriarch while working for an ostensibly welcoming family. Amid tensions and confrontations, Ava discovers strengths she never knew she had. How will she handle the cruelty and deep-seated prejudice? Will she find an environment where her dignity is respected? Ava adjusted the rearview mirror and took a deep breath before getting out of the car. It was her first day working as a nanny for the Anderson family, and the house in front of her looked welcoming and well-kept. The light blue painted facade and the well-trimmed garden exuded a sense of calm that Ava hoped to find inside. With one last look at her reflection, she opened the car door and walked to the entrance. Sarah, Emma's mother, opened the door with a warm smile. "You must be Ava. It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person. Please come in," she said, gesturing for Ava to enter. Ava smiled, feeling a bit more at ease. "Thank you, Sarah. I'm very excited to start." Inside the house, the atmosphere was cozy, decorated with soft colors and comfortable furniture. A series of family photographs adorned the walls, showcasing happy moments and family trips. Ava took off her shoes and followed Sarah through the living room to the kitchen, where John was sitting at the table, having coffee. "Hello, Ava, I'm John. Welcome," he said, standing up to shake her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson," Ava replied, appreciating John's firm handshake and direct gaze. "Please, call me John. We're happy to have you with us," he added, smiling. Sarah led Ava through the rest of the house, showing her where the bedrooms, bathroom, and Emma's play area were located. Finally, they reached the girls' room, where Emma was sitting on the floor playing with a set of building blocks. "Emma, this is Ava. She will take care of you while Mommy and Daddy are working," Sarah said, crouching down to be at her daughter's level. Emma looked at Ava with curiosity and then smiled shyly. "Hi, Ava," she said, holding out a heart-shaped block. "Hi, Emma. It's a pleasure to meet you," Ava replied, accepting the block and sitting down next to her on the floor. "What are you building?" "A castle," Emma said excitedly. "Do you want to help me?" Ava smiled. "Sure, let's build the most beautiful castle ever." As they played, Ava felt an immediate connection with Emma. The girl was curious and affectionate, asking questions and laughing happily at Ava's answers. It was clear that Emma was the center of Sarah and John's world, and Ava felt a growing responsibility to protect and care for her. After a while, Sarah called Ava to the kitchen. "I'd like to show you Emma's daily routine and discuss some basic rules," she said, picking up a detailed notebook. Ava listened attentively as Sarah explained meal times, play times, and house rules. She appreciated Sarah's clarity and organization, which made it easier to understand her expectations. "I also want to introduce you to my mother-in-law, Margaret. She lives with us and usually helps with Emma," Sarah said, with a slight hesitation in her voice that Ava noticed but did not comment on. When they were introduced, Margaret evaluated her with a critical look. "So you're the new nanny," she said, without offering a smile. "I hope you're up to the job." Ava maintained a polite smile. "I'll do my best, Mrs. Anderson." Margaret just nodded, her gaze still assessing. Ava felt a slight tension in the air but did not want to jump to conclusions. She decided to focus on her work and build a positive relationship with the family. In the following days, Ava adapted to the house's routine. Emma seemed to like her a lot, and Sarah and John showed confidence in her work. However, Ava couldn't help but notice Margaret's constant presence, watching her every move. There was something in Margaret's looks and silences that made Ava uncomfortable, a feeling she couldn't quite identify. One afternoon, while Ava and Emma were playing in the backyard, Margaret approached. "Remember not to spoil Emma with too much freedom," she said in a tone that sounded more like an order than advice. Ava nodded, trying to stay calm. "I'm following Sarah and John's instructions to ensure Emma is happy and safe." Margaret did not respond, just walked away, leaving Ava with a feeling of unease. That underlying sense of tension was always present, like a shadow she couldn't shake off. Despite these uncomfortable moments, Ava remained focused on her job, determined to provide the best care for Emma. She hoped that, in time, Margaret would become more friendly or at least more tolerant. But as the days went by, Ava began to realize that Margaret's acceptance might never come, and that the true test of her strength and resilience was only beginning. The sun shone brightly in the blue sky on a Sunday, as Ava helped Emma get dressed for the family lunch. Emma was excited, choosing a floral dress and chattering non-stop about how much she loved Sunday lunches when the whole family gathered. For Ava, it was an opportunity to get to know the family dynamics better and integrate more into the environment. Sarah was in the kitchen, preparing lunch, when Ava and Emma entered. "Ava, could you take Emma to the dining room? We're almost ready," said Sarah, giving a quick smile. "Of course, Sarah," replied Ava, taking Emma's little hand and walking towards the dining room. Upon entering, Ava saw John adjusting the seats around the long, elegant table, which was impeccably set with silverware and crystal glasses. "Hi, Ava. Feel free to sit wherever you like. The whole family will be here today," said John, pointing to the empty seats. Ava nodded, feeling a mix of nervousness and curiosity. She chose a seat next to Emma, helping the girls settle in. While waiting, she talked to Emma about the girls' favorite toys, trying to ease her own anxiety. Shortly after, Margaret entered the room with determined steps and a serious expression. She wore a classic dress and discreet jewelry, exuding an aura of authority. Seeing Ava, she slightly frowned but quickly composed herself. "Good afternoon, Ava," she said without a trace of a smile. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Anderson," replied Ava politely. Margaret sat at the head of the table, observing Ava with a critical eye. "So, Ava, Sarah told me you've been doing a good job with Emma," she began, in a tone that seemed more inquisitive than complimentary. "I'm doing my best to take good care of her," said Ava, trying to maintain her composure. Margaret tilted her head, as if evaluating every word. "Do you have family around here?" she asked, with a look that suggested the answer would be important to her. Ava hesitated for a moment before answering. "My family is a few hours away. I have a sister and a brother who live in the city." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. And what do they do?" Ava felt uncomfortable with the intrusive question but answered politely. "My sister is in college and my brother works in a factory." Margaret gave a tense smile. "I hope they are well. And your parents?" "My parents passed away a few years ago," said Ava, feeling a tightness in her chest at the memory. Margaret nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answers. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, but her tone sounded mechanical. Sarah and John entered the room with plates of food, interrupting the conversation. "Time for lunch," said Sarah, trying to ease the tension in the air. They began serving the meal, filling the table with delicious and colorful dishes. While eating, the conversation was punctuated by Margaret's questions that seemed more intended to test Ava than to get to know her. "Do you have plans to study more?" Margaret asked in a disinterested tone. Ava swallowed hard. "Yes, I plan to go back to school next year. I want to take a course in early childhood education." Margaret nodded but made no comment. John and Sarah tried to lighten the atmosphere with talks about work and vacation plans, but Ava felt Margaret's presence as a constant shadow. "So, Ava, do you plan to stay with us for a long time?" Margaret suddenly asked while cutting a piece of meat. Ava felt everyone's eyes on her. "I hope so. I'm really enjoying working here and taking care of Emma." Margaret nodded slowly. "We'll see," she said with an enigmatic smile. The tension in the room was palpable, but Ava continued to smile and answer politely, determined not to let Margaret notice her discomfort. After lunch, everyone got up and began to disperse around the house. Ava helped clear the table, taking the opportunity to take a deep breath and compose herself. Sarah approached, placing a hand on Ava's shoulder. "You're doing very well. My mother can be difficult, but she'll get used to you," she said with an encouraging smile. "Thank you, Sarah. I really hope so," replied Ava, appreciating the support. As Ava prepared to leave, Margaret appeared at the kitchen door. "Ava, a moment," she called with a serious expression. Ava stopped, feeling her stomach churn. "Yes, Mrs. Anderson?" Margaret observed her for a moment before speaking. "I hope you understand the responsibility you have here. This family is very important to me, and I hope you live up to it." "I understand, Mrs. Anderson, and I will do my best to meet your expectations," said Ava, trying to keep her voice steady. Margaret did not respond, just nodded and left the room. Ava took a deep breath, feeling the tension lessen a bit. She knew she would need a lot of patience and strength to deal with Margaret, but she was determined to prove her worth. As Ava drove back home, Margaret's words echoed in her mind. The feeling of discomfort was still there, but Ava decided she would not let it affect her work. She was determined to create a positive environment for Emma and keep her job, no matter the challenges. Sunday arrived once again, and the Anderson house was bustling with preparations for another family lunch. Ava was helping Emma tidy up her toys in the bedroom while Sarah and John prepared the meal in the kitchen. Emma, excited, talked about how much she loved Sundays because there was always delicious food and everyone was together. "Ava, are you going to sit with us today?" Emma asked, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Of course, Emma. I'll be around to help you and your parents," Ava replied, smiling at the girl. When the table was set and everyone was ready to sit down, Margaret entered the dining room, impeccably dressed as always. She looked around and frowned when she saw Ava approaching the table. "Ava, could you help me in the kitchen for a moment?" Margaret called, her voice laden with an authoritative tone. Ava nodded, feeling a knot form in her stomach. She followed Margaret to the kitchen, where the woman abruptly turned to her. "Listen, Ava," Margaret began, her expression serious. "I don't like black people, and I don't think it's appropriate for you to sit at the table with us." Ava was shocked, Margaret's words echoing in her mind. "Mrs. Anderson, I'm just here to help and take care of Emma," she said, trying to stay calm. "I don't care. You can serve the food, but then you must leave the room," Margaret said in a tone that brooked no argument. Ava felt a mix of humiliation and anger, but decided not to cause a scene, especially in Emma's presence. "Understood," she said, her voice trembling. When they returned to the dining room, Ava placed the dishes on the table and stepped away, heading to the kitchen. She watched from afar as the family sat down and began to eat, Emma's laughter sounding like distant music. The pain and indignation began to gnaw at Ava from within, but she knew she couldn't let it show. She needed to stay calm for Emma. Sarah and John were busy with their own matters, talking about work and vacation plans. They seemed not to notice Ava's absence at the table. Each laugh and casual conversation heightened the sense of isolation and pain Ava felt. She tried to distract herself by tidying up the kitchen, but her thoughts kept returning to Margaret's cruel words. After lunch, Sarah came into the kitchen to get the dessert. "Ava, are you okay? You're very quiet today," she asked, with a concerned tone. "I'm fine, just a bit tired," Ava lied, forcing a smile. Sarah didn't seem entirely convinced, but didn't press the issue. "Okay, please join us for dessert," she said, returning to the dining room. Ava knew she couldn't continue like this for long. The humiliation and anger she felt were beginning to affect her mental health. She needed to find a way to deal with Margaret while maintaining her job and Emma's well-being. When dessert was over and everyone began to disperse, Margaret approached her again. "Remember what I said, Ava," she murmured before leaving the room. Ava nodded, feeling the knot in her stomach tighten even more. She knew she had to do something, but didn't know exactly what. Her mind was racing, trying to find a solution that wouldn't harm her relationship with Sarah and John, and, most importantly, wouldn't affect Emma. Ava decided she needed time to think and compose herself. When she finished cleaning the kitchen, she told Sarah she needed to leave early that day. "Okay, Ava, rest, and we'll see you tomorrow," Sarah said, still with a worried expression. Ava drove to a nearby park and found an isolated bench where she sat, trying to process everything that had happened. The pain and indignation were still there, but now mixed with a sense of helplessness. She knew she couldn't continue like this, but she also knew that any hasty action could have serious consequences for her job and her relationship with Emma. As she watched the children playing in the park, Ava began to think about her family and friends. She needed to talk to someone about what was happening. She needed support and advice to decide her next step. Ava closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was determined to find a way to deal with the situation. She needed to be strong, not just for herself, but also for Emma. The days following the incident at lunch were difficult for Ava. Margaret's words echoed in her mind constantly, like a ghost she couldn't dispel. The feeling of humiliation mixed with anger and sadness became increasingly unbearable. Ava found herself in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, questioning whether she should continue working for the Anderson family. During work, Ava maintained a forced smile on her face. Emma, with her childlike innocence, sensed that something was wrong. "Ava, are you sad?" Emma asked one afternoon while they played in the yard. Ava forced a smile, feeling a tightness in her chest. "I'm fine, Emma, just a little tired." Emma frowned, concerned. "You don't seem fine. You can tell me, we're friends." Emma's sincerity touched Ava deeply, but she knew the girl was too young to understand the complexity of the situation. "Thank you, dear. I promise I'm fine," Ava said, stroking Emma's hair. At night, Ava faced long hours of insomnia. Lying in her bed, staring at the ceiling, Margaret's words repeated like a scratched record. "I don't like black people." The cruelty and hatred in that phrase disturbed her deeply. She felt increasingly isolated and vulnerable, not knowing who she could turn to. Lila, her best friend, was one of the few people Ava felt she could open up to. One night, Ava decided to call her, hoping to find some comfort. "Hi, Lila. Do you have a minute?" Ava asked, trying to hide the anguish in her voice. "Of course, Ava. What happened?" Lila responded, concerned. Ava told Lila about the incident at lunch and how Margaret had treated her. Lila listened in silence, and when Ava finished, there was a pause before Lila spoke. "Ava, that's terrible. You can't continue in that environment. You deserve to be treated with respect." "I know, Lila, but I'm worried about Emma. She's a wonderful girl and needs someone to take good care of her," Ava said, her voice trembling. "I understand, but you also need to think about yourself. You can't sacrifice your dignity and well-being for a job," Lila said firmly. Ava sighed, feeling the weight of Lila's words. "I'll think about it. Thank you for listening." After hanging up, Ava felt a bit more relieved, but the doubt still lingered. She began to reflect more deeply on her place in the Anderson family. Sarah and John were friendly people, but seemed oblivious to Margaret's behavior. And even if Ava confronted the situation, she feared the consequences. The days passed slowly. Ava continued to care for Emma with the same dedication, but her mind was constantly occupied with recent events. One afternoon, while reading a book to Emma, Sarah entered the room. "Ava, can I talk to you for a moment?" Sarah asked, with a worried expression. "Sure, Sarah. What's up?" Ava responded, feeling a knot form in her stomach. Sarah sat next to Ava, looking at her seriously. "I've noticed you haven't been well lately. Do you want to talk about what's going on?" Ava hesitated, feeling the words stuck in her throat. She wanted to tell Sarah about the incident with Margaret, but feared the reaction. "I'm just dealing with some personal things. Nothing I can't handle," she said, trying to sound convincing. Sarah sighed, but didn't press. "All right. Just know that we're here to help if you need it." Ava thanked her, but felt even more lost. She knew she would have to make a decision soon. The inner turmoil was starting to affect not only her work, but also her mental health. The sleepless nights continued. Ava got up several times, pacing around the apartment, trying to find some peace. Every thought led her back to the confrontation with Margaret. The humiliation she felt at that moment was like an open wound that wouldn't heal. One night, unable to bear it any longer, Ava decided to write about her feelings. She sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen, and the words began to flow. She wrote about the incident, her emotions, and her doubts. Writing seemed to relieve some of the weight in her heart. As she finished writing, Ava realized she needed to make a decision about her future at the Anderson house. She knew she couldn't continue living in the shadow of Margaret's racism, but she also didn't want to abandon Emma. She needed to find a way to resolve the situation that preserved her dignity and well-being. Ava closed the notebook and sighed. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was determined to find a solution. As she prepared to sleep, she felt a slight sense of hope. Perhaps, somehow, she could overcome this challenge and come out stronger on the other side. Ava knew she needed support and advice to deal with the situation she was in. She decided to start by talking to her best friend, Lila, who had always been a source of comfort and wisdom. On a Saturday afternoon, she met Lila at a cozy cafe downtown. "Ava, you look so worn out," Lila said as soon as they sat down. "What's going on?" Ava took a deep breath and told Lila about the incident at lunch with Margaret and how it was affecting her life. Lila listened attentively, without interrupting, her face expressing solidarity and indignation. "That's horrible, Ava. You can't keep working there," Lila said firmly. "You need to confront Sarah and John or find a new job." "I know, Lila, but it's complicated. I'm so worried about Emma. She's not to blame for any of this and needs someone to take good care of her," Ava said, her eyes filling with tears. "I understand, but you also need to take care of yourself. You can't sacrifice your dignity and well-being for a job, no matter how important it is," Lila replied, holding Ava's hand. "I'm here for whatever you need." Ava thanked her, feeling a bit more relieved to share her burden. However, she knew she also needed to talk to her family, especially her older brother, Michael. He had always been a protector for Ava, and she knew he would have a strong reaction. That night, Ava called Michael and asked him to visit her. When he arrived, she told him everything that had happened, from the lunch incident to her sleepless nights and the conversation with Lila. Michael was visibly furious. "This is unacceptable, Ava. I should go there and teach that woman a lesson," he said, clenching his fists. "Michael, calm down. I don't want to cause more problems. I just need advice on what I should do next," Ava said, trying to calm her brother. "I understand, but you can't let that woman treat you like this. You deserve respect." "Maybe it's time to look for another job," Michael suggested, trying to control his anger. "I'm considering all options. I just don't know if I'm ready to leave Emma. She needs me," Ava replied, feeling torn. In the following days, Ava decided to seek support in online communities, where she found groups of people who had gone through similar experiences. She read stories of others who had faced racism at work and found comfort and inspiration in their journeys of overcoming adversity. One night, while reading a particularly moving account, Ava began to feel a new sense of strength growing within her. The words of support and the advice she found online made her realize that she was not alone and that there were many ways to deal with the situation. She decided to share her story in one of these groups, hoping to get more perspectives. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with many people offering words of encouragement and practical advice. Some suggested she calmly and firmly confront Sarah and John, while others recommended seeking legal support if the situation did not improve. With all these new insights and perspectives, Ava began to form a plan. She knew the next step would be crucial and that she needed to be prepared for any outcome. In the following days, Ava couldn't think of anything other than the conversation she needed to have with Sarah and John. The inner turmoil and sleepless nights had become unbearable, and she knew she had to confront her employers about Margaret's behavior. The words of support from Lila, Michael's protective fury, and the inspiring stories she had read online gave her the courage needed to face the situation. On a Saturday morning, Ava decided it was the right moment. She knew Sarah and John would be at home, and she could talk to them without interruptions. With her heart racing, she asked to speak with both of them in the living room. "Sarah, John, can I talk to you for a moment? It's something important," Ava said, trying to keep her voice steady. Sarah, noticing the seriousness in Ava's tone, exchanged a worried glance with John. "Of course, Ava. Let's sit down," she replied, gesturing to the sofa. Everyone settled in the living room, and Ava took a deep breath before starting. "I wanted to talk about something that happened a few weeks ago at the Sunday lunch," she said, trying not to let her voice tremble. John frowned, visibly confused. "What happened, Ava?" Ava closed her eyes for a brief moment, recalling Margaret's cruel words. "During the lunch, your mother, Margaret, said that I couldn't eat with the family because she doesn't like black people." Sarah turned visibly pale, and John looked surprised and uncomfortable. "What? This must be a misunderstanding, surely," John said, trying to downplay the situation. "It wasn't a misunderstanding, John," Ava insisted, feeling the urgency to be heard. "She said it clearly, and it left me deeply hurt and humiliated." Sarah held John's hand, trying to process the information. "I didn't know this had happened. Why didn't you tell us before, Ava?" she asked, her eyes welling up with tears. "I was afraid of how it might affect my job and my relationship with Emma. I didn't want to cause problems, but this situation has been tormenting me ever since," Ava explained, feeling tears begin to form. John sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm really sorry you went through this, Ava. My mother, she can be very difficult. But she's from another time, and sometimes she says things without thinking." Ava bit her lip, trying to contain her frustration. "That doesn't excuse what she said. I deserve to be treated with respect, regardless of her age or where she comes from." Sarah finally spoke, her voice low and trembling. "Ava, you're absolutely right. This is unacceptable, and I'm so sorry you experienced this in our home. We will talk to my mother and make sure this doesn't happen again." "Thank you, Sarah," Ava said, feeling a slight sense of relief. "But I also need to know if I have your support. I need to know that I am safe here." John and Sarah exchanged looks, and John was the first to respond. "You have our support, Ava. We will not tolerate this kind of behavior. We will make sure my mother understands that." "That means a lot to me," Ava said, feeling the tears streaming down her face. "I just want to work in an environment where I feel valued and respected." Sarah stood up and hugged Ava. "We will resolve this. You are important to us and to Emma. We want you to feel safe here." John nodded, looking a bit calmer. "We will talk to my mother later today. Please let us know if anything like this happens again." Ava thanked them, feeling a huge weight lifted off her shoulders. She knew that the conversation with Margaret was still to come, and that it would be difficult, but she felt strengthened by Sarah and John's support. As she retreated to her room, the feeling of relief and the hope for positive changes accompanied her. The day after the conversation with Sarah and John, Ava was nervous. She knew they had promised to talk to Margaret, but she had no idea how the matriarch would react. She spent the morning distracted, taking care of Emma and trying to stay calm. When Sarah called her for a conversation in the afternoon, her heart raced. "Ava, can we talk for a moment?" Sarah asked, her voice laden with tension. "Of course, Sarah," Ava replied, following her into the living room. John was already there, a serious expression on his face. Sarah began to speak, visibly trying to find the right words. "We talked to my mother last night about what you told us." Ava felt a chill down her spine. "And how did she react?" John sighed, crossing his arms. "She didn't take it well. She said you misunderstood her words and that she didn't mean it." Ava felt a mix of frustration and indignation. "I know what I heard, John. There was no misunderstanding." Sarah tried to intervene. "Ava, we believe you. But my mother is from another time, with old-fashioned ideas. I know that's no excuse, but maybe the best approach is to ignore those comments and continue focusing on the work." Ava shook her head, incredulous. "Ignore? I can't just ignore something like that. It hurts me deeply." John looked uncomfortable. "We understand, Ava. We really do. But if you can avoid direct conflicts with her, maybe it will make things easier for all of us." Ava felt a weight in her chest. "So, you're asking me to silently endure her racism?" Sarah, visibly shaken, tried to ease the situation. "That's not what we're saying. We want you to feel comfortable here. We'll talk to her again and try to make her understand how unacceptable this is." Before they could continue, Margaret entered the room, a cold and calculating expression on her face. "So, is this where you're hiding the truth about me?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Sarah stood up quickly. "Mother, please, we're trying to resolve this civilly." Margaret ignored her daughter and looked directly at Ava. "Do you think you can come into my house and accuse me like this?" Ava, trying to stay calm, replied, "I'm not accusing Mrs. Anderson. I'm just saying what happened and how it made me feel." "This is ridiculous," Margaret retorted. "You're exaggerating. I'm from another time, yes, but I never meant to offend you." Ava realized it was pointless to argue with someone who wasn't willing to listen. "Margaret, your words were very painful for me. I just want to be treated with respect." Margaret snorted. "Respect? And the respect you should have for me as part of this family? This is a house of respect, and you're here to work, not to create problems." Ava felt tears beginning to form but took a deep breath. "I understand that I'm here to work, but respect needs to be mutual." John intervened, trying to calm things down. "Mother, please, let's all calm down. Ava is just asking for a respectful work environment." Margaret crossed her arms and remained silent, clearly unsatisfied. Sarah, desperate to find a solution, turned to Ava. "Please, Ava, try to ignore my mother for now. We'll keep trying to resolve this." Ava felt completely powerless. It was now clear that racism was more deeply rooted in the family than she had imagined. Margaret's attitudes wouldn't change, and the lack of direct action from Sarah and John only made the situation more complicated. In the following days, Margaret became even more hostile. Passive-aggressive comments and contemptuous looks became frequent. Ava began to feel increasingly vulnerable and isolated. Sleepless nights returned, and her internal anguish grew. Emma, innocent, noticed Ava's sadness. "Ava, why are you sad again?" she asked, holding the nanny's hand. Ava tried to smile. "I'm just a little tired, Emma, but I'm here for you, always." Ava began to realize that staying in that environment was more harmful than she had anticipated. She needed to make a difficult decision about her future. It was time to seriously consider other options and find a place where she could work with dignity and respect. The days that followed were ones of intense reflection for Ava. The growing hostility from Margaret and the lack of decisive actions from Sarah and John made the situation untenable. Every passive-aggressive comment from Margaret felt like a blow to her self-esteem, and Ava knew she couldn't continue in that toxic environment. One morning, after another sleepless night, Ava made a decision. She knew she needed to protect her mental health and dignity. She spent the day with Emma, trying to cherish every moment, knowing she would soon have to say goodbye to the girl. In the late afternoon, while Emma was napping, Ava sought out Sarah and John. They were in the living room, discussing some vacation plans. Ava took a deep breath and entered the room, feeling a knot in her stomach. "Sarah, John, I need to talk to you," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. They stopped their conversation and looked at her, worry evident on their faces. "Of course, Ava. What happened?" Sarah asked, sensing the tension in the air. Ava took another deep breath, trying to hold back tears. "I've made a difficult but necessary decision. I'm going to leave my job." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "What? Ava, please, let's talk about this. You don't have to make such a radical decision." John also seemed shocked. "Ava, I know things have been difficult, but we can find a solution." Ava shook her head, feeling the tears start to flow. "I really appreciate your support, but the situation with Margaret has become unsustainable. I can't stay in an environment where I'm constantly disrespected. I need to protect my mental health and dignity." Sarah placed a hand on Ava's shoulder, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Ava. I really am. I didn't want it to come to this." John sighed, looking exhausted. "I understand, Ava. We couldn't change my mother's way of thinking, and that's something unfortunately beyond our control. We respect your decision." Ava nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. "Thank you for understanding. I'll stay until the end of the week, so you can find someone to replace me." Sarah wiped away her tears and tried to smile. "Thank you, Ava. You've been wonderful with Emma, and we'll miss you very much." In the following days, Ava began to plan her next steps. She updated her resume and started looking for new job opportunities. She felt anxious, but also relieved to be taking control of her life again. She sought support from her friends and family, who encouraged her to move forward and not give up. On Friday, her last day of work, Ava spent the entire day with Emma, cherishing every moment. In the late afternoon, when Sarah and John returned home, Ava knew it was time to say goodbye. "Emma, sweetheart, I need to tell you something," Ava said, kneeling beside the girl. "What is it, Ava?" Emma asked, her eyes curious. Ava swallowed hard, trying to hold back tears. "I have to leave, dear. I'm going to work somewhere else. But I promise I'll always be around, and we'll keep in touch." Emma frowned, her eyes starting to fill with tears. "But I don't want you to go, Ava. You're my friend." Ava's heart ached, but she smiled. "And I'll always be your friend, Emma. I'll always be here for you, even if we're not in the same house." Emma hugged Ava tightly, and they cried together. Sarah and John watched closely, visibly emotional. Sarah approached and hugged Ava as well. "Thank you for everything, Ava. You've made a huge difference in our lives." John shook Ava's hand in a gesture of respect. "Good luck, Ava. We hope you find a place where you are happy and respected." Ava left the Andersons' house that night with a mix of sadness and relief. She knew she was making the right decision, but saying goodbye to Emma was one of the hardest things she had ever done. As she drove back home, she felt a new sense of hope and determination. She was ready to find a new beginning, where she could be valued and respected. Ava looked out at the horizon as she awaited a response regarding the job interview she had done a few days ago. Since leaving the Andersons' house, her life had taken a new and unexpected turn. She had allowed herself a period of rest and reflection, but knew she needed to find a new job to move forward. Finally, the phone rang. It was Rachel, the director of the community center where Ava had applied to work with children in an educational program. "Hello, Ava. We'd like to offer you the position. We'd love to have you on our team," Rachel said, her voice full of enthusiasm. Ava felt a wave of relief and joy. "Thank you so much, Rachel. I'm very happy for this opportunity." On her first day of work, Ava was warmly welcomed by Rachel and the community center team. The environment was welcoming, with vibrant colors on the walls and children's laughter echoing through the halls. She felt immediately at ease. Rachel introduced her to the children, who were eager to meet her. "This is Ava, our new teacher. She'll be with us every day," Rachel said. The children surrounded her, full of questions and smiles. Ava knelt to their level, feeling grateful to be in a place where she was valued and respected. Over the following weeks, Ava immersed herself in the work, dedicating herself to creating an environment of learning and fun for the children. She felt fulfilled, seeing the positive impact she had on their lives. One afternoon, while organizing an art project, Rachel approached her. "You're doing an amazing job, Ava. The children love you," she said, smiling. "Thank you, Rachel. I really love being here," Ava replied, feeling genuinely happy. As time passed, Ava began to reflect more deeply on her journey. She remembered all the suffering she had endured at the Andersons' house, but also the strength she had found within herself to overcome the trauma and racism. She decided she wanted to use her experience to help others facing similar situations. She researched community initiatives against discrimination and found a local group fighting for minority rights. Ava reached out to them and soon found herself involved in various activities and events. She began giving talks about her experience, sharing her story, and offering support to those in need. In one of these talks, Ava spoke to a room full of attentive people. "I know what it feels like to be disrespected and diminished, but I also know we have an incredible strength within us to overcome these challenges. We need to support each other and fight together against discrimination." The audience applauded, and Ava felt a profound sense of accomplishment. After the talk, several people approached her to thank her and share their own stories. Ava realized that by turning her pain into a force for good, she was finding a new purpose. While continuing her work at the community center and in anti-discrimination initiatives, Ava kept in touch with Emma. She received letters and drawings from the girl, which she kept with affection. She knew she had left a positive mark on Emma's life, and that filled her with pride. One night, while reviewing her plans for an upcoming talk, Ava received a message from Lila. "I'm so proud of you, Ava. You've become an inspiration to so many people." Ava smiled, feeling grateful for the friends and family who had supported her during her journey. She replied to the message, thanking Lila for being by her side through all the tough moments. Ava's life had changed in ways she never imagined. She had found a new job where she was respected and valued, got involved in causes that were important to her, and turned her scars into a source of power and resilience. Although she still faced challenges, Ava knew she was on the right path. She was committed to continuing the fight against discrimination in all its forms, helping others find their own strength and resilience. Ava faced many challenges during her journey as a nanny in the Anderson household. From her first day, dealing with Margaret's pressure and finding comfort in her bond with Emma, to the tough decision to leave her job, Ava showed incredible strength and resilience. What do you think about Ava's decision to confront Sarah and John about Margaret's behavior? Would you have done anything differently? Leave your comment below and let us know your opinion. Give the video a like, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with your friends. Your opinion is very important to us, and we want to know what you think about this touching story. Let's continue this conversation in the comments. Now, check out this story. Skylar was about to say yes at her perfect wedding, but a mysterious glance from a stranger at the back of the chapel changed everything. Who was this enigmatic man, and why did he seem to know more about her future than she did?